Good evening. Welcome to our fourth webinar of the Jenny Lind Foundation Summer Session. My name is Diana Ryan, and I have been the choir director for about 16 years. And this evening, I have the opportunity to, I'm going to walk back a little bit. This evening's professional guest artist is featuring Aaron Shaul, and the moderator for this evening is Cary Nasatir. And first of all, we have a little bit of housekeeping. This summer session is student driven, and we have I think it's been added now. There's 4 of our student coordinators who are going to tell you about what activities are going to happen this evening. So girls. There's Julia. Okay. We're expecting Julia and
Good evening, everyone. Welcome.
Thank you, Jody.
Okay, sorry. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 4th webinar in our summer series. My name is Jody, and this is Kritika and Julia, and we are high school student coordinators working with the Jenny Lind Foundation. We hope you enjoyed the last webinar with Harrell Harris and D.A. Kidon Levy. Again, we would like to start off with a couple of reminders and announcements.
If you haven't already, please join our closed Facebook group. Just search for Jenny Lind Music Program on Facebook and make a request to join. You will have to answer a few entry questions, and that's just so we can ensure child safety and verify that you are indeed a registered participant.
In addition, please join our Remind. If you text @JLF202 to the number 81010, you will receive text messages directly to your cell phone with reminders about upcoming webinars, spirit events, various competitions, and prizes. It's a great way to stay up to date and informed about all our activities for this program, especially if you don't have any social media accounts to follow us on. But be aware that texting charges may apply.
Through Remind, we also send our daily safety tips. Today, we have a Media Monday safety tip. Before sending or entering sensitive information, such as a credit card or bank information, check the security of the website. You can identify secure sites by looking for addresses that start with HTTPS rather than HTTP.
We hope you enjoyed Tuesday night's Kahoot. Tonight we will not be hosting a Kahoot, but we will be holding a virtual scavenger hunt with 5 winners instead. So look forward to that. We will display a tiny URL code that leads to a Google form for you to fill out, and all the answers will be hidden throughout the Jenny Lind Foundation website. The first 5 winners will each win send a picture to either our Instagram account at Jenny Lind Foundation or email us at jennylindphotos@gmail.com by Friday at midnight. We will have 4 winners winning up to a $20 Staples gift card, and these winners will be announced next Monday. For more information on our dress-up competition, check out our Instagram page.
Speaking of spirit dress, these are our winners from last week. We will be in contact with all of them shortly to award them for winning. Thank you everyone who participated, and we hope to see your submissions this week too.
Lastly, we would like to encourage everyone to participate in our summer fundraiser, JLF Wear. JLF Wear is a great way to show spirit and connection to the community. And this year, we will be selling our yearly summer program Spirit Wear online through Custom Ink. Our Spirit Wear logo this year is Better Together, and you can buy them online at tinyurl.com/JLFshirt2020. This fundraiser will close on July 9th at 9 p.m., the day after our last webinar airs. If you order an item of JLF Wear, it will be shipped directly to your house 2 to 3 weeks after the fundraiser closes. And if you missed any of these announcements, don't worry, they will be in our weekly newsletter sent to the email you provided in the registration. Also, if you miss any of these webinars, we will be posting recordings on jennylindfoundation.org. Thank you again for tuning in. We hope you learn a lot from our featured guest speaker tonight. And now we will pass it on to our fellow student coordinator, Shakti, for another announcement.
Thank you, Kritika, Jody, and Julia. Before we start our webinar tonight, we wanted to also introduce a project we were working on this summer. So for some background, this year we prepared a virtual memorial service for Jenny Lin on May 27th. And this included a student-made video where past JLF summer participants answered questions on what the Jenny Lin Foundation means to them. Here is an excerpt from that video.
What is one word to describe the Jenny Lin Foundation?
Community.
Welcoming.
Supportive.
Friendship.
Unity.
Family. Unique.
Community.
Inspiring. Connection.
Support.
Family.
Inspiring.
Hopeful.
Community. Togetherness.
Community.
Engaging. Priceless.
Community.
Inspiring.
Friendship.
All right, and if you'd like to see the full video, it is available on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. So this summer, we wanted to recreate a similar video with all of our virtual participants. So look out for more information coming soon on how you can contribute to this summer recap video. Thank you for listening. Does anyone have any logistical questions or wants to see any of the slides displayed up again? Any of the links? If there's no questions, I think we're all good here, so I will now hand it back to Miss Ryan.
Thank you for that great job, ladies. That was really informative. I'm looking forward to some of these things that we can do. So thank you again. It is now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Cary Nasatir. He is the orchestra director for the Jenny Lin Summer Music Program. And just take it away, Cary.
All right, no problem. Well, I was thinking, Diana, thank you, and welcome to the Jenny Lin Foundation Summer Webinar Series. I'm Cary Nasatir, and our guest tonight is bassist Aaron Shaul. You'll be able to ask Aaron questions by writing them in the question and answer section on the bottom of your screens, and please keep them short and to the point. Aaron, how are you?
I'm good, sir. It's so good to see you.
Well, it's good to see anybody, and it's good to be seen.
It's been quite an end of a semester, so to speak.
Yeah, for people in our business, I mean, a lot of people obviously in the audience know about, school and we didn't get to do this or didn't get to do that, and missing concerts, and I obviously we can feel for that because we haven't been performing. At least for me, I haven't been performing since March, and everything just went by, and I would imagine the same with you. So Aaron's been a musician and a bass instructor here in the Bay Area for the past 20 years. He's a talented player, I have to say that, Aaron, and who is as comfortable playing Beethoven and Mahler as he is playing Barques and Miles Davis. And before the COVID pandemic, and that's what we were just talking about, you could find him in the pit of the Orpheum Theater playing Hamilton. So as I mentioned Hamilton, but I want to get back up a little bit and ask you things about your instrument. And a lot of folks in the audience want to hear that and want to hear your take on things. Coming up, did you always play bass?
No, I started, and it's funny. I was trying to, refresh my memory this afternoon just to have all the juicy tidbits I might have forgotten about. I think my first connection to music, my parents, my mom had her mother had a little spinet, or like one of those really small upright pianos in her house, and we'd mess around with it. And at some point, because it wasn't being played, she got it, and I recall it was, this was probably late 80s, early 90s. I think I was in 6th grade, 7th grade, 6th grade, 5th grade. Anyways, The Simpsons had just come out, because I remember that I was really upset that my piano lesson was happening at the same time as The Simpsons. And so I took about 3 years of piano lessons, learned how to read, had a great piano teacher who I ended up running into in junior college. She was a teacher there, but she could tell from, she was never in the same room during the piano lesson, but she could scream at you, and it was like she knew you were using your third finger instead of your pinky. And you know, there's so many stories. Or she'd be in the bathroom and she'd scream, and no, wrong. It's like, how do you know this? So I was really intrigued through that, and she had me do a lot of listening, and I think that's where I really started doing listening, because there wasn't music in the house per se. I forget what my dad. I think he liked Patsy Cline, and that's probably about it.
That's not bad.
No, it's
That's only gonna be one. Patsy Cline's it.
And my mom had some like Barbara Mandrell tapes in the car, and like
Some
a Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton Christmas album or something. So yeah, I remember getting a little radio, and we could get like the local radio station where I grew up in Lake County, which has like one radio station. And I remember with piano, I wasn't getting to play the music that I wanted to play. I mean, I understood that there's all these little, you know, one-page etudes for beginners, and of course we have to go through all that stuff. But you know, I was starting to listen to music, and even if it was dumbed down versions of Mozart or something, it's like, can I play that? and I quit taking piano lessons because I didn't have much control over the situation. Mind you, I was just a kid, but I think even then was like, that's it. So does that answer your question, kind of?
Yeah, no, it definitely did.
And then I got really involved in, you know, I rebelled against my father, who was a retired Marine Corps drill instructor, who was very hard-jawed. Grew my hair long, started listening to heavy metal and hard rock in probably 7th grade. And immediately, I don't know what the draw to the electric bass was at the time, but it seemed like everybody played guitar. I didn't really like the drum. I mean, I liked the drums, but I never wanted to sit down and play it. And I thought, well, all right, you know, the bass. And I could read from piano. And so I took just a handful of lessons from like the only local guy who was also the guy that taught guitar and probably some keyboard and some other stuff at this the only music store in a town of like 5,000 people. And quickly realized that, you know, the technique was there, the posture was there, but I was paying him whatever it was a week to memorize scales, essentially.
Yeah.
And after so many lessons of that, I just thought, you know what? I can do this and save some money. So bought some books. I don't even remember what they were. A lot of sight reading stuff. Some like the press that Berklee College of Music Press had a bunch of like great sight reading contemporary rhythms. There was an old LA player named Bunny Brunel. I forget who he played with. He was a beast, but he had these great books on, you know, it's just running the drills. Here's the scale. Really opened up the fingerboard for me. And then about halfway through high school, really got into music. I mean, it was like, if I wasn't doing homework, well, pretty much all through high school, I was like listening, like, and not just like sitting on my bed doing something else, but I was actively staring at the ceiling, actively listening to music. And
Did you play music in any school groups?
You know, we didn't have an orchestra, and I didn't come to the double bass until God, I was probably 18 or 19. I finally bought a cheap Palatino. Yeah, so we didn't have an orchestra, and I remember like in middle school, you know, seeing the kids that you didn't have a band period, that you got to leave one of your classes towards the end of the school day for, you know, 35 or 40 minutes. And I was like, look at these kids going, why do they get to get out of class? And oh, they're going to go to, you know, band. And that just never occurred to me. I didn't start a school ensemble until high school, and that was jazz band. And that was all on electric bass. And it was all reading. There was no improvising. But
and no chord charts.
No, but having, you know, when I came in, because there were no bass players in the area.
Yeah.
There was a girl that they had so many keyboard players, because everybody played piano, that one of the girls sat on a keyboard back by the rhythm section and played it was just a terrible synth bass sound. But you know, for her it was easy. It was her left hand, so her reading was spot on, and I had to play with her the whole time. And it was like, if I messed up, she was always right, so I couldn't, you know, the pressure was there, so to speak. And I guess that was my first experience having to blend in an ensemble, I guess. Like double basses and orchestras that, you know, we all have to sound like one thing. So that, I remember spending a couple years just reading like mad, or whatever I can get my hands on.
Yeah.
And it you know.
And
like
you were playing in rock and roll bands, or?
I auditioned for a pop band. Oh, of course, yeah. I had buddies that, you know, we played some school rallies, played a lot of rock and roll. And, you know, if there's any parents listening and you've got kids that are rebellious, you know, I had the jean jacket. I still have that jacket someplace with the heavy metal patches all over it, and the back patch, and the combat boots. I grew my hair down to my belt line, believe it or not. And yeah, I was hard rock. But I had a couple of teachers that were spectacular about halfway through high school. One was a guitar player who I still talk to this day. He was my English teacher, great guy. And a math teacher who had played some electric bass in his youth. And so, you know, he found out I played, and both of them started to loan me CDs of some pretty far out stuff. Some Police, like, you know, at the time I wasn't listening to pop music, and plus that was, you know, that music was already 10, 15 years old at that time anyway, so that was, you know, classic rock. And then the math teacher gave me like a Stanley Clarke CD, one of his early CDs, that just blew my mind. His sound, his slap style, the quality of musicians. There was a John Patitucci on his first solo albums. And I met John at a certain point.
Chick Corea's bass player.
And he is now Wayne Shorter's bass player, and has been for decades. That's like the best job you could ever get.
Yeah.
Or most creatively free. And I had to pick him up from a hotel and take him to a bass clinic. And I remember telling him, like, man, I had that album and it just, like, it blew my mind. And he laughs at it because he's like, yeah, it was just all full of chops and trying to play a zillion notes at once.
He seems like a nice guy. I haven't met him, but I've seen him a couple times. He's like a real warm guy.
Very intense without getting in your face. But yeah, a wonderful person. We talked a lot about cooking. You know, he's a very spiritual man, very involved in his church and religion. And yeah, it was shocking. And not to judge anybody on their height, but he is not the tallest guy. I was very surprised.
Hey.
Yeah, you're sitting down.
I am standing up, actually. Yeah, right.
And then at a certain point, you know, I started to get into more pop music in high school, and I actually auditioned for there was a back when we had newspapers and want ads, there was a bass player wanted, and I met this singer who was, she was probably in her mid-20s at the time, and she worked with a guitar player and a drummer, and I had to go over to her house, and I had no idea what the job involved. These guys were already working the local club scene, I guess you could say. And, you know, so the ear training from doing all of that listening, playing along with those, you know, albums and CDs in high school, trying to figure out what the players were playing, even if you couldn't figure out the notes, you know, perfectly, that you could understand what the chord quality was. And then the ability to memorize all that stuff, which I don't memorize music like that anymore. And I had to sit down, and she threw a bunch of, like, God, it was mid-90s pop, like Melissa Etheridge and some dance stuff, and just said, here, play along with it. And I got that gig, and there was, what was that? It was Canocti Harbor Inn, was the big venue up there. And that led to a lot of different bands after high school and through junior college. I didn't go to college right away because I had rebelled against my father. My mother had gotten remarried and left the county, so it was like 17, and I had graduated and, you know, not going to live with my dad, so I just lived on my own and went to school part-time. But on the weekend evenings, I was playing top 40 music all around Sonoma County, Lake County, Mendocino County, Napa.
Can you
And
explain what top 40 is?
these are bar gigs, I guess you could call it. Top 40 music, meaning you turn on your popular radio station, or it might have been like VH1 or MTV back in the day. Pretty watered down, you know, not necessarily music for musicians, but music that the general public likes to listen to. And they were gigs that were, you know, 9 p.m. to 1:30 in the morning, you know, and that was so going to school.
And Denny's afterwards.
But I was a chef. I had a cooking job that got me through all of that. So I always had to turn around and either probably cook in the morning and then run off to more jobs. And that was
that's the life.
It was my first exposure to like, you're on your own. You have to juggle your schedule. And it was fun because you were like the youngest, most inexperienced musician in that crowd. And there was a couple great folks. Some of the Doobie Brothers lived in the area. Like my first gig, one of their guitar players, a guy named Dale Ackerman, came and sat in with us, and I thought it was the coolest thing to get to play with like these rock stars. And the drummer he was the first son of a musician named Bill Champlin, who was of former Sons of Champlin fame. Yeah. Great music, great singer. He played in Chicago, so we got to open for Chicago in 2000. Was it 2000? So yeah, I thought I was living like the rock star life. Giant amplifier, great basses, and being a bass.
Were you playing 4-string or 5-string or both?
Both.
5-string.
Yeah, my first real good professional electric bass was a 4-string, and then I saved up my God, what was it? Saved up all my lunch money because my father didn't like music, and I for like a whole year saved my lunch money. I think I bought that first.
That's
bass.
so difficult. I never could figure out how to save my lunch money.
And starved, man, starved.
Yeah, I've never known that. But so your family moved. You were telling me some time ago. Your family moved around a bit, and you didn't get to the East Bay actually until you started college at Cal State. I'm old enough to say Cal State Hayward, so I'm
Hayward. That's what my diploma says.
Right. So that was about 20 years ago. So why Cal State Hayward? Why the
That's
switch
a great question. So even through the Veterans Affairs program, for some reason they were able to cover my little brother's education at San Francisco State because through the veterans, he was 3 Purple Hearts in Vietnam, and they considered you 0 disability or greater. And if I kept my income under a certain amount, the Veterans Affairs would pay all of my tuition until I was probably in my mid-20s. But because I was living on my own, I think they paid for a semester of junior college, and that was it. So I figured I couldn't afford to go to like a UC, and just wanted to kind of test the waters because I had taken a bunch of music classes and had finished, you know, at least a year of a music degree. And got my associates, and I was looking at either Northridge, this is why it's great to have good teachers who know where to send students. And so that was kind of
people. If you're talking about 2000, you had Tim Smith was there at Cal State, and you had Dave Esselman on the jazz, and of course I know you studied with Pat Klobas, who also was on faculty there. Tell me about Pat a little bit and the interplay you had with Pat Klobas. Pat is a great bass player, and he was playing when I first met him with Turtle Island String Quartet.
That's right. Yeah.
Daryl Langer, and but he's also doing operatic and doing the opera, doing ballet, doing symphonic, and does the whole Freeway Symphony. We'll explain what Freeway Symphony is later. But did you go there for him? Did you know?
I did not. So in fact, it's funny that was my audition was his first year auditioning students. So Carl Stanley had just left to do, I think he had gotten the job as he was already playing with the Oakland Symphony, he was the contractor, I think, or personnel manager.
Yeah.
And I met Carl. I went to school with his son, who's a great trumpet player. Oh my God. And so it was just kind of on a whim, and knowing this in hindsight that, I'm always telling my students, find out who these teachers are. It could be Yale, it could be some cruddy state college in the middle of nowhere. Find that teacher who's doing what you want to do. I've had colleagues go to like USC to study with Peter Erskine, and Peter's great. He's an awesome teacher, but he was never around because he's on tour with Steely Dan and the London Symphony and all this great stuff. But he would send good subs though. It was funny because you had Gordon Goodwin on, right? Yeah. So he would non-drummers would come in to teach us classes. But anyways, sorry, Pat. So it was either Northridge, Sonoma State, which was too close to home. Northridge, I wasn't a fan of Southern Cal, and just kind of took a chance here. And they said they had a great program, and it was still a classical program. So even though they had a great jazz study, that was the heyday. That was like the peak. That top jazz band, Rosemary Clooney, had just hired like that whole rhythm section to play on Oprah, I think it was. I mean, it's these are kids that were professional musicians, and they were like 22, just monsters. So I kind of took it.
What did he do for your string bass playing?
So I had never played with a bow, ever, because I had no school orchestra, and was fairly self-taught on the instrument. He cleaned up my technique like mad, but because of you said that how diverse Pat is, that he could take somebody like me and what solo literature do you have prepared? And I'm like, there's solo literature for the bass? And he goes, oh, let's play me a jazz tune, play me some all blues or some just like he got you playing, and I looking back on it, that he must have looked at me and gone, oh my God, this kid's like, I wanted to get out of there in 2 or 3 years, which if you haven't played with a bow, you got to start square one.
Were you in performance or were you in education?
I was a performance major, so I had to challenge my sophomore year at Cal State, which I did. So I still got out of there in 3 years, and then put on an hour and a half classical recital. So never having played with the bow, practiced my rear off. Wasn't working over the summers. Like I didn't have like a job. I took a lot of student loans out to help pay for the bass that I bought one of Pat's, my beautiful orchestra bass. I can't say enough about him, both as especially a friend at the time. He knew I could play electric bass really well. He referred me to my first union job up at Woodminster was a referral from him, and it was the Whiz, so it was all electric bass, great stuff. I got a call from Stu Ham through Pat, which was like, for me, oh my goodness, Stu Ham's I never got the job because he didn't know. He's like, well, who are you and what do you do and what have you done? And I'm just like, I'm a 22-year-old kid, man.
One of the things we try to do, and I usually say in my first session with when we're in regular session with Jenny Lynn, but that this is building community, and in the business world they call it networking, but in music you're building your own music community, and when you go on gigs, people hear you and they recommend you for something else, and then you're going to a particular gig and you have an engagement and you see half the people there or half the people in the pit you've played with before, you've seen them, oh yeah, I haven't seen in a while. These are the same people, and as you go through from venue to venue to venue to venue, you start seeing familiar faces.
Cary, a lot of those people that played on that first production, the union job, I mean, I don't think I made any money from it because I had to spend all the money joining the union. But it was, I still work with those people to this day, and they are at the top of their. I mean, they were at the top of their game then. And it's and the relationships. You quickly saw the people that were either they had personal problems that kind of sidetracked their ability to either show up on time. All kinds of things, not having reliable vehicles, alcohol abuse, whatever. And you quickly saw, I don't want anybody to ever talk about me like that. And it was, so much of it was just, dude, if you can be there early, everybody made mistakes. Like nobody's perfect, but you get there on time, you keep your mouth shut. Yeah, your gear is good. So, nothing's breaking. Oh my
You're not
goodness.
wearing a Dayglow green socks on stage
And-
where everybody else is in a tux.
And please dress. Yeah. Funny stories.
I am not throwing away my shot. See what I did there?
Yeah, I like that.
That's called a segue. Enter Hamilton. We have some questions coming up about
Sure.
Hamilton. You've been playing shows, local theater. It must have been nerve-wracking for you to find yourself in the bass chair of the hottest musical in the country?
Yeah. So we're talking about networking and your reputation, and even the people you don't like, you don't talk poorly about them, because just like you said, it is a smaller musical community than you could possibly imagine, and even more so, the music director for Hamilton, her name's Lily Ling. She's a beast. I had met
piano.
Yes, and Mrs. I mean, she's playing and like taking notes with the other hand, and like you should see the emails of notes I got from her. And her husband.
She showed them to me. I did see him.
Or I guess he's an ex-husband now, was a percussionist that I played with at the conservatory. If you know Stan Muncie.
You sure?
Yeah, so one of Stan's buddies married this, and it was so weird to see how they're all Canadian, and here we are, like, oh my God, I know you, which didn't buy me any forgiveness. So like a couple days before my wedding, I got a text from this other bass player named Dan Feisley. I'd heard of the guy, never met him, and he kind of threw the proposition like, it's going to run a long time, and I don't want to be doing 8 shows a week. Is this something that you're interested in? And that just came on word of mouth by somebody, Dan Robbins, who teaches jazz bass at San Jose State now. Dan's seen me play like once, and we all have a bunch of the same colleagues, but Dan didn't want to do it because he wants to play his music. He didn't want to be like locked into some place.
Interesting.
I had worked with the contractor for years on all kinds of jobs. He's never called me for anything, and it was weird that Dan Feisley just kind of took a chance. I don't know if I could ever do that. Like, are you crazy? I need somebody I know.
How far in advance did you have the music?
About 3 months. And me, it's like I got married and then kind of waited until December to really start, buckling down. So, we were working and teaching, and then Dan said, hey, would you mind coming over to my studio? He's a recording engineer as well. And just play through the book. I've got a video of the musical that they've given us for rehearsals. He had just gotten back from Puerto Rico where they did that whole thing with Lin-Manuel.
Right.
And I hadn't played the second half of the book yet. I had just I was like, I'm just one song at a time. And I'd gotten through the whole first act, and I had
52, and there's 50
there's
tunes.
50 tunes.
Yeah.
And I had to sight read most of the second act in front of him, which, another testament to musicians be able to read, be able to subdivide in your head. And that was a scary thing.
I saw the drum book, and I didn't see the bass book because I wasn't looking at the bass book. I noticed in the drum book and the orchestrations, every note, every pop, every click, everything is written in. I thought, oh, there's a lot of improvising going on. Then I started looking at that music. It means everything was very little. Same on the bass.
My book, I think there was a total of maybe 4 measures, maybe 5 throughout the whole book, where it actually gave you a chord symbol and just said ad lib, but you still play in the style of whatever it was. Everything was written out. So even worse, this music director with these giant ears, I got so much grief for 6 months that you don't sound like Dan. Dan does this. Dan does these. And she's not a string player, so she can't tell you in our language. So I was just constantly, and it was little silly stuff like, it could have been, right hand placement. So maybe Dan was playing closer to the bridge for a punchier sound, or maybe he was playing right over the fingerboard for a warmer, fatter sound. And none of this stuff's written in. Right. So you're constantly making these mental notes, sending him a text like, dude, what do you do on this song? I can't make her happy. And then the technology at the same time. So you're playing keyboard bass on about 6 songs. They had a little 2-octave keyboard with a synth sound set up. And then you have this giant pedal board of all these special effects, mute buttons. So if you put an electric bass down, you have to mute it. You pick the double bass up, you have to unmute it on a completely separate pedal board, and you have to remember to do that for everything. So 2 electric basses.
Are you sitting the whole time on a stool, or are you standing for the stand-up?
Standing for the stand-up, because Dan is shorter than me. So the stool, yeah, I don't even think he played double bass sitting down. So yeah, that's the first time I've stood in years playing the double bass. I always sit on a stool. So yeah, two different electric basses, keyboard bass.
Four and five.
So four instruments, and then we had like a backup 5-string in case a battery died or whatever. Which actually one of the output jacks started to go on his main 5-string, and that was a panic to like pick the instrument up and just hear nothing and go, and you jiggle the cord, and all of a sudden you're in. And
yeah, well, again, what I'm getting at too for the audience. We have a lot of musicians and educators in the audience as well.
Sure.
They assume you know how to read. They assume that you can play your bass upside down and backwards, and you can read in any key. But you touched on something, and that is the electronics, and not the electronics, but the digital electronics and the effects and the synthesizer, which your piano comes in if you're playing a synthesizer keyboard, your piano chops come back in. So everything you're learning comes to the forefront when you're in a situation like, especially a do or die situation, and you've got to understand, our world. There's not much changing in the world of trumpets. I'm not putting trumpets down at all.
Sure.
There's a ton of stuff changing for electric bass, for drums, for percussion. That is way beyond the purview of what percussion or what bass playing is, and that's all the electronics. Let me ask a question. We have a question from the audience. What are your thoughts on the new Hamilton movie coming to Disney Plus next week? Somebody's plugging it. Somebody must have some stock in Disney. Do you think that releasing a pro shot of Hamilton devalues the show?
I don't know. That's a hard one, because I had heard of the show before this whole thing started, and I had never really heard any of the music before I started having to learn it. All I know is that it was the original cast and the original run on Broadway, and they recorded a couple performances. They had nobody in the audience, and I think they just did this thinking, this, if it is big, we might have a movie out of it. Good for him, though. I forget. I think he said he sold that to them for, what was it, 70 million? I mean, it was something just like, oh my goodness, like nobody has to do the work. It's already recorded. You've already done it. But there was another thing.
Do you think the producers were also thinking about? I know they were thinking about doing a movie, but as far as timing it with, we're all in SIP, we're all on lockdown in our houses, and nobody is playing and stuff, and that a movie would.
They were gonna do the movie. I think the movie deal was pre-coronavirus. So I think they had already planned on doing that, and Disney were the only people that had the money to do that. But they're all brilliant folks. We met the orchestrator. He came in. What's his name? Lacrimore, Alex Lacrimore. He's a genius, and so as stressful as that job was, to have him sitting in another room someplace with headphones listening, and he's there to listen to the band and taking notes, and to get like one note from him on a slide being too long, I think was
somebody wants to know what happens if you mess up live.
Okay, so my biggest mistakes weren't wrong pitches, and I was playing somebody else's electric bass, somebody else's double bass. So my practice to prep for that job, the only way, it's because it's like a space station with just where you can set the instruments down, where all the technology is located, even how the pages are arranged. That I had to come in during their tech weeks and like their first couple weeks of actual performances on the doubles. So like in between a double on a Wednesday or on a Saturday, typically it was a Saturday, I would drive over there and not get paid, and I would have like 3 hours in between shows to actually sit there on that equipment with those instruments and just practice. And then you get paid to audit twice, which means you come in and sit in the pit and watch and read along, and I think it was like half of your wage, so that's cool. But and then they give you a day, and it's like, all right, you're in on Tuesday. Here we go.
You got to sound like the other guy.
And Dan was there auditing me as well, so I got 50 pages of notes from him.
Going back a little bit, you said sounding like, and then you have to sound. You went through a period where people said, well, it didn't sound like the other bass player.
Mhm.
And the consistency, not just Disney, although Disney is insane about it. I know Lion King, some of the other things they've done, they're insane about making sure that, like right now, Hamilton has did have 8 productions going in the world. Every one of them, if somebody walked in, it would be the same as in another city.
Even so much so that they recommended that, because there was the 2 electric basses. One was a flat wound string, kind of the book calls it a Hofner, a Beatle bass, which was like the Paul McCartney. So flat wound strings, there's foam under the bridge, and you kind of palm mute, and you play it with a pick. So
Carol Kay style.
And they had recommended like all of the productions, because you can find all these bass players on Facebook, and it's like, hey, you know, and you start asking the questions, that they all wanted a kind of a high-end jazz bass sounding 5-string electric, and most of them were using, you know, big custom shop, expensive instruments, famous names if there's any bass players here, Lakeland's, Sadowski's, another New York company. Yeah, great instruments. So yeah, you would want, and then it also called for a C extension because there were some low Ds. So I don't know if there's a, like how bad they need that low D or low E flat, but that's another thing you've got to have.
Can you explain what that extension is?
Yes, my orchestra bass is wrapped up in a case. It's an extended, the end of the fingerboard on the lowest string is extended, and it has these little capos that you can either lock down to play a lower note. So essentially, my first capo is an E, a low E, but if I open the capos, I can go all the way down to a low C, which is an octave below a cello's low C.
And that's an orchestral thing, and I have a question too. That it mostly you see that in orchestral playing, where the bass players all have extensions. Have you played a show before where you had to have an extension? I don't remember ever seeing that in the pit.
I know I did before I got the C extension, because I just remember, you know, you just took something up an octave. If the musical director is generous with your, you know, because sometimes it sounds good to change that lower, and you know, like maybe the rest of the orchestration, the brass is like really pumping. It's like, you know, it should be a low note, an octave lower, and you know, you can, and this has happened to me, that you do it, and the conductor talks to you at some point and says, play what's on the page, or you play it and they look at you and they go, I like it, keep it. And that's just, I would feel that out before I did that. I would never do something like that on Hamilton without permission, period.
So that's not in the book?
What, the C extension on Hamilton?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Oh, it
yes.
is in the book.
Yep, there's a couple low Ds right in the first number.
I have a question. What's your favorite Hamilton song?
The ones that stressed you out the most. So there was what the Schuyler Sisters was a fun one to play, because it's really bop bop boot it up boot up boot up boot up dop boo boot up, and you just the rhythms, like the 16th notes, the weird off. I mean, I haven't played that music in months. And then there was what was the Washington song? One Last Time. I always got grief for, because the music director, her way of feeling swing 16ths was not as a groove player, did not agree with me. And she was, even after like 6 months of doing that show, you know, she'd start emphasizing something like you're not with me, and it's like, no, you're rushing, we have a click track, it's not me. So now what do? Do I say I'm the one who's right, or do I just bite my lip, shut up, and the director is right? So and I learned
that's a classical versus
very quick to not get defensive. I forget what something was, and it was like, whatever my excuse was, oh, I'm playing somebody else's bass, or I accidentally hit the wrong pedal, and I got that tone of voice, and I remember after having the conversation, I just thought, I sounded like a 5-year-old talking, you know, it wasn't me. And
my bass string.
But even her response was still very professional. It was, you know, like a parent, you know, it's like, okay, I don't care who did it, it's not going to happen again.
Right.
So, yeah.
Have you ever met Lin-Manuel? Was he?
No. So they got to do the fundraiser for the hurricane benefit, and he was playing the lead role again. Just the orchestrator, which, you know, he's the musician. He's a genius. And then who else was there? A couple of John Mader's friends came through that were spectacular musicians.
We're seeing John Mader next week, I think.
If I could get a link to that just so I could drop in and, you know,
give him a hard
listen to
time.
And, you know, that was another great thing was those musicians, like the string players I'd all worked with in like orchestra stuff before, but the guitar player I'd heard of for years.
Skylar?
No, I've known Skylar as Dave McNabb.
Oh, McNabb.
Yeah, he's up in Sonoma County. And then John Mader was like a legend. I was scared to death. And, you know, for people that don't know, most of these productions, and this is everything from like award shows, maybe not all the musicians might have a click track. Maybe it's just, maybe it's a conductor that has a click track in their ear. It's essentially a metronome that's programmed. 90% of the show is played to a click. And you hear a little voice, or it's written on the music that just says 3, 4 at the top and kind of quotes. You'll either hear somebody, a pre-recorded voice in your ears go 3, 4, tick, tick, tick. And then you just hear tick, tick, tick for the whole song. So being able to, especially like something like John Mader, who can lay back and still, like, he's with the click, but it sounds so relaxed. And there are times to where you're like, it's weird. Like the beat has, you know, 3 sides, and no matter where you hit it, it all sounds correct. But sometimes he would, you know, lay back a little bit, and it's like I try to find that, and while you're listening to all these other things going on, and still control your breathing and not get nervous. And there were some like great moments.
Folks that watched Gordon Goodwin last week here are hearing the exact same thing. Gordon was talking about where the beat is and being behind it or being right on top of it, and that is important. And it's also you can get into a thing with a click in your ear where you're chasing the click. It's not just a metronome. It's different because it's got a life of its own. It will wander into a 3/4 to a 4/4 wherever the time changes, unlike most metronomes.
And you know, the poor percussionist who has to be a drummer, you know, there were some times where, you know, the click just like he forgot to hit it, or his foot slipped. And this was later when Mader had gone to LA and our percussionist auditioned for the drum book and got it. So it was, and then they have to learn the show with a completely different drummer. Even one of the subs was like, it was really hard.
Can you talk about that?
With him.
Can you talk about that in terms of when you're sitting in the pocket and with the rhythm section, and you put another player in? What does that do? What does that do to the mix? I mean, if another bass player or another drummer, it's another drummer. Why is that?
One of the drummers would start to lean, like he pushed the click, or he was really ahead. You know, there were times where I'm guilty of the same thing. That was really hard. But the drummer who came in after John, Jake Wood, like there were some things that he did on some of the swing tunes that felt, you know, Mader's a monster drummer, but Jake was doing something just so differently, and just his interpretation of, I think, swinging even harder. Like he just, you know, instead of being so laid back that it was kind of on edge, that it was like, wow, this is how the song like should be. It was kind of cool. But at the same time, you have to match that. And all your life as an orchestral player, you're getting yelled at for not blending with other people. And that relationship of you know, I think more so than any of the other pairings in the rhythm section is that, you know, the bass player and the drummer, like you have to be as one, otherwise everything else on top of that just the ship could sink at any minute.
We have about 10 minutes, 12 minutes. There are some things I wanted to get to. Let me ask a couple questions from the audience.
I've got more time if you want to go like an extra 15 minutes, Cary.
Let's go to 10 o'clock, okay?
Let's do it.
So, yeah.
Go ahead.
They pay good overtime here.
Right.
Excuse me. What's your favorite composer and why? And that could be from any of the genres that you work with.
Oh man.
I know.
That's a really unfair question to ask. You know, I have my like favorite like classical, my romantic era composers. I was a big like Berlioz. I can't hear Symphony Fantastique without the hair on my arms and my neck just. And I, you know, because I came to classical music later in life, I never thought I'd say something like that. Berlioz. There's some great opera that, and I don't think I would have gotten that appreciation for it if I hadn't had to have played it. So like Puccini, I other than music school and a listening class, I probably never would have heard that stuff. And I played like with Pat Clovis. I used to house sit for him, so I'd still like to plug. I've got nothing. Pat was more than just a mentor. I would house sit for him, and he had this CD library of any bass player's wildest dreams. And he'd go off and do some festival symphony someplace, and I'd watch his dog and just kind of hang out in his house for like 3 weeks every summer for about a decade. And I was burning CDs left and right. I mean, there's still stuff that I have that I haven't listened to. My C extension, he helped me finance by giving me work. I was doing, what was it, like staining a deck for a friend of his, or I mean, you know, that was like $4,000 worth of C extension. My professional bow, he had a property in San Francisco that he had owned since his like 20s. That he rents out. So I was doing some weatherproofing for that. My bass, being able to pay him, you know, $5,000 and then make another couple years worth of payments when I got my financial aid. You know, I don't know where I'd be without Pat Clovis.
Yeah, good guy. When you're sitting around relaxing, what do you like listening to?
70s singer-songwriter music. You know, my wife was she's way into the same kind of stuff. Everything from John Denver to Tower of Power to if you heard our road trip music, it would blow your mind. Yeah, probably 70s. Whether it's like singer-songwriter stuff or, you know, just the dance band, the Earth, Wind and Fire, you know. I'm not a giant lyrical person, so if I do listen to music with a vocalist, I really have to like the sound of their voice, and I need some like deep meaning in those lyrics if you're just singing, you know, which is why I never got into Rush. I couldn't stand his voice.
A lot of people in the audience do not know who Rush is.
I know. Go do your homework. It's a band that every musician is supposed to like.
Just a couple more with COVID and sheltering in place. This passion we have for live music and performing has, you know, really crippled our industry. And from the folks who play weddings and bar mitzvahs all the way to people in the pits and Broadway and Hollywood and Vegas and all of that. How are you staying in shape, and what's your practice schedule like?
That's a great question. You know, have been very clear with my students. You know, I used to have like 25 weekly double bass students outside of schools, and now it's like 5, maybe 6. I wasn't inspired to touch an instrument for at least 3 weeks after, you know, that was thankfully we had, because of Hamilton and having a W-2, I did have unemployment. I have a lot of musician colleagues that do 1099 work, which is, you know, they don't take taxes out. Some of them still haven't gotten any, you know, assistance or funding. That was a giant blessing to have that. I was ready to, for the first time in our life, buy a condo. We had just gotten those talks started, trying to get approved for a, you know, essentially a home loan. They don't like loaning money like that to musicians. I've been laughed at for the last couple of years, and they always say, well, get a co-signer. It's like, my parents aren't going to do that.
So do you practice 4-string differently than you practice 5-string, or is it all the same?
It's all the same. So if I've got an instrument set up. You know, I do the same thing on the double bass, but we think of the double bass a little differently. More as, you know, as a classical musician, you're so used to crossing a position and then running up a string. So there's all kinds of games that, you know, I encourage students to do here. But for Turn this on. Oh, there's no sound. Can you hear that, Cary?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so to pick a key, and I'm also recommending this to my orchestra students, jazz students, whether you play the clarinet or whatever, there's so much language and theory involved in these scales. I like to sit down and just pick a major key, C major, for instance, and I'll play, E to E, F to F, whether it's 2 octaves and then start, covering territory in the middle of the fingerboard. And eventually expanding on that idea, shift to the next position, shift, 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 shift. And it's all C major, and you could do, fun things like patterns of fours. Turn this up a little bit. Etc., or patterns of threes. 1, 2, third, etc. That's double bass, electric bass. And to do that, I still use a drone pitch, especially with the double bass. My intonation is pretty darn good, but none of us are perfect. And that metronome is going most of the time.
It's a beast.
Yeah.
Aaron, it has been a great pleasure. We have no time left.
Oh, Cary.
But I have enough time to thank you.
I'm happy to hang if people want to chat.
I'm glad you could do it, and it was interesting getting some of your insights into what goes on in the pit. That's the time we have for tonight. I want to thank our guest, Aaron Shaul, and thank you, the audience. You can hear that applause. A shout out to the folks in the background. Thank you to our engineer, Lana Lee, and producers, Jan Steinhoff and Lynn Foy-Kush, and all the hardworking student coordinators. I want to remind you that our next session is tomorrow. I'll be interviewing operatic tenor Ricardo Garcia, and these sessions are brought to you by the Jenny Lind Foundation. And if you enjoyed tonight's session, let us know at jennylindfoundation.org/contact-us. And the Jenny Lind Foundation is a nonprofit 501c3. Please check out our website, jennylindfoundation.org, and search the music, safety, and donation links. And now back to Lynn. Good night.